Hi, hello, and welcome to another Way for Tech channel where we're exploring ways of making the products, digital products specifically, more user-friendly, more user-centered, more inclusive and accessible for the users, at the same time being profitable for the businesses that own them. Okay, today, great video, something that I really care about, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will be interested in kind of finding out more about, is learning user-centered design. Now, user-centered design, for me personally, after working in the digital space for over 14 years, is one of the most important principles and processes to follow in order to create really amazing technology, okay? So what are we going to talk about? First of all, let's cover what is user-centered design. User-centered design is a technique or rather process in when we are involving our user in every single step of design decisions. Okay, so the user is included from the beginning, from the research phase, all the way through to the design, step by step, all the way to actually going live, because even then we obviously want to include users and get their feedback and so on and so on. The benefits of using, obviously, user-centered design are incredible compared to not using user-centered design. I saw it in many projects, and you could very easily see where something was designed without user involved versus it was designed with the user in mind. Okay, so first of all, it's a process that puts user in the center of attention and is using the user feedback all the way through to design process, all the way through to the finish. Second of all, a very important bit, and this is something that not many people are talking about. If we want to use user-centered design in the company, the entire product team needs to be user-centered. It's not going to be enough if there's only one person, like user experience designer, who is into user-centered design, because unfortunately, if the entire company or a very big tech team are not user-centered, they're not going to be very helpful in terms of accommodating some of the processes involved in user-centered design, as well as they will overriding decisions made based on interaction with the users. So very important thing that I cannot emphasize enough. Everybody needs to be on board of user-centered design. Okay, so there are certain steps that you can follow in the process, which I cover in a second, which make the actual user-centered design, in my view, very straightforward. Some people saying it's very complicated, but I think everybody needs to work out what is the right pace for them and what are the right things to use in different circumstances, because as you guys know probably by now, there is a idea of the process, and there are also the actual circumstances of the project, of the program, of the product, when you have to be flexible and adapt depending on where you are in the project. So using different elements of the user-centered design process will allow you to, even in difficult situations, work out what is the best next action. Okay, and just lastly, we just wanted to talk about quickly about the benefits for the business using user-centered design. Now, if you're a business owner, this is important for you. If you use a user experience designer, you can very easily convince a business or your team to use user-centered design, because the benefits are amazing. So first of all, very, very simple. User-centered design allows for much better user experience. It's going to be more easy to use your product. It's going to be that you will have much less friction, you will have less bad feedback, better rating, and stuff like that. Second of all, from the business perspective, you can definitely improve conversion. So simpler flows, optimized to what people are actually expecting to see, will lead to improved conversion, whether it's conversion to register or conversion to buy stuff. definitely user-centered design is your friend if you are looking into optimizing those things. Now, next bit is the delivery time. Okay, so if you're using user-centered design, the actual delivery cost and time will be much shorter because you are designing the product and doing testing before it's being built. And as we all know, the most expensive time to make any changes when something is already built. Developers hate doing that, businesses hate doing that. So very often what you're gonna do, you're gonna end up with a really poorly built product, and you might be stuck with it for many years going forward. So doing it before, doing all of the difficult stuff, testing and involving user before any development is done is the best thing you can do for your business. Okay, next up, another business benefit is a much better market fit. So if you're doing user research before even starting doing the project, you will understand much better how to manipulate your product, how to change your wording, your marketing comms, in order to fit the market much better. Because very often, and I worked with a lot of startups as well, they have an idea about something, but they're not really validating what the market really needs that, or they have really good product or idea of a product, but they packaging it in a very different way than the market would expect it. So user-centered design, user research will allow you to avoid that situation when you have a really bad market fit. Another benefit for the business is a competitive advantage. So obviously, if we do really good market research and user research, and if we do usability testing, we talk a lot with our customers or potential customers, we potentially could design a much better product than our competitors. A very big mistake that a lot of companies actually make is copying exactly as whatever the competitors have. They take it and copy it exactly as it is and make exactly the same product. So there is no real differentiation between the products online. So there is no real competitive advantage. And so lastly, obviously the biggest benefit also for the business for using user-centered design is loyalty. So if people really like using your product, it's easy to use. There's no issues, they feel comfortable with that, they trust it, you will have a much bigger loyalty from your customers and much higher customer satisfaction. So there you go, those are benefits for the business. So if you're a business owner, definitely take that into account. If you're a UX designer, take those and you can advertise them to your program manager, product owner, team, whoever is the decision maker around the processes in your design. Okay, guys, let's now have a look on the at actual user-centered design process. Like, what are the steps that I would normally follow if I was to work on a project? Again, I have to repeat it again, that there is a theory of what we should be following, and there's also a practice. So bear in mind that when you start working on the project, you will not be able always to follow all of those steps in this order, but you can pick and choose things as you go. Remember, the main principle is just to include the users in the design process and the decision-making process. Don't count on your business or your product owner to create feature and backlog of the features of things that you need to create. Always try to convince the business to include the user, to investigate whether those things actually are important for them. Okay, let's have a look at the process. First of all, let's imagine that you arrive to a completely new project where nothing yet has been done, okay? That would be very lucky because it doesn't happen very often, I have to tell you. When often you arrive to a project, there's already lots of stuff done and you have to kind of come in and start designing. But let's say you have this luxury of defining problem with the business. And I tell you one thing, businesses find it very, very difficult to kind of define a problem using one sentence. So ideally, they would say, okay, we're helping this kind of users to solve this kind of problem. Okay, it sounds very simple, but try it with your business, try it with your project, and you'll see this is not very simple at all, because we will have different variations and so on. Okay, so after defining the problem, once we know what the problem is and who actually we're solving this problem for, I strongly recommend doing a bit of user research and validate whether this actually is a problem. So usually when I would arrive to a company, they usually would tell me, well, we already done market research, so we know who are the users, we know it's needed, and we just want to go into design phase. Okay, if you're lucky, you can then say, look, we need like literally just 1 week of a bit of a user research to run some interviews, one-on-one interviews with people, and understand whether there is a problem that we want to solve, but also it will give you amazing opportunity to understand the context in which people have this problem, and that in return will also make you aware of how the product fits into their life. So the product that you're going to be designing, how they'll be using this to solve that problem. Okay, after running the interviews, what I really like to do is create really high-level personas. Personas can be very tricky, and many companies don't want to make them, only because nobody understands A, how to make them, and B, how to use them and apply them in the project. I strongly recommend making even very high-level personas. Don't go too crazy. Like very often in so many courses or online, you go and create all this fancy big printouts that then they hanging on the wall. Nobody ever reads that. Nobody knows how to apply it. So keep them very, very simple. Just stick some the biggest kind of differentiation between those personas. Also, don't create too many personas. If you can create 3 personas, that would be like ideal, unless your product is very complicated and you want to address many different problems of many different personas. But the more complicated personas you make and the more personas you have, the more difficult it might be to apply. So as with everything else, keep it very simple. Or if you're not familiar with how to create personas, you can for the time being skip that step, although it's very, very useful. But make sure you have really clear understanding who are the people you're designing for, and whether they have different kind of type of problems. If you can't group them, just keep them in one list. That also should work if you don't know how to create the personas. Okay, obviously, if you work in the company, you would make a bit of like a playback, so you can make a bit of presentation of discoveries you made during those interviews, and whether you validated the problem that you're trying to solve with the company or not. Maybe you'll find some other opportunities. So all this stuff we should play back to our, maybe not even company, but maybe our project team, so that you can make more decisions around the next step, which is actually designing wireframes. Okay, wireframes is something that I love using. I know a lot of designers don't use them, partially because they don't see the point. Also, very often company doesn't have time or budget to create wireframes. I personally find them amazingly useful. Wireframes are basically like a blueprint of your building. So you kind of like, instead of thinking about what kind of chandeliers you're gonna have in the flat, you just thinking literally of a structure of the product that you have. So you can even use piece of paper, and I've done it many times, to sketch out ideas for some initial screens, like what kind of data you will require to pick up from the user, what potentially a dashboard might look like, what kind of stuff, where the button is going to go, what kind of flow is going to be. So you can create combination of wireframes and wire flows. So wireframes is obviously just single screens with some basic elements on it. Wire flows, you can use those wireframes and create actual user journeys. I do it very often on a piece of paper, even before doing anything in any of the programs such as Figma, okay? Because otherwise you just get carried away by all of the details, and this is not what you want to do at this stage. Now, what I've done in the past, I literally took those wire flows and sat with users and tried to understand whether this is a good starting point, Trust me, it saves so much time. You don't have to even design anything. You literally can show them screens on a piece of paper, and people will get that, and you straight away will get some kind of feedback. So next stage, you will start creating some more detailed wireframes, okay, or more detailed designs if you wanted to. But it's a great starting point. If you don't want to use that, if you don't want to sit on a piece of paper with somebody, or you're doing it remotely and you definitely need to use some kind of Figma or other program for remote user sessions, yeah, definitely then you can use Figma and create wireframes or some kind of simple clickable prototype in that way, okay? So right, so wireframes and or like very high level designs we then use for user sessions and getting some initial feedback. During those sessions, it's very important to, and I'll cover it in other videos because it's a whole other sort of school of how to run user sessions. But basic principle is that try to run those sessions one-on-one, be the moderator on those sessions. Don't send designs to users to give you feedback because you might miss out on lots of different opportunities. Also, always book those sessions one-on-one, book from like 30 minutes to 45-minute session, where you run through the product as if they were using it for the first time, because that's what is important. So people don't see your product before you're actually testing it with them, okay? Like I said, I will cover it in another video how to run usability sessions, but for now, let's just understand that we take the feedback from the usability sessions, we make the decisions around which things we want to take into account and which things we want to ignore. Now, this is really tricky, and people ask me that very often. So from usability testing, which things can we ignore and which things we should take into account for making changes? And this is a tricky question. I mean, you really literally need some 5 people to do usability testing. Trust me, you don't need any 20 or 30 people. You can do some research online and you will see that statistically 5 people is enough. Now, if people are saying things like, I don't like the blue color of the button, or, I don't like this font, I wouldn't worry too much about those kind of comments. Where I would really get worried if 1 or 2, or rather 2 or 3 people didn't know what to do in the next step in the particular task that we want them to perform. That's when you need to start thinking, okay, what can I do to make it simpler? Maybe this is labeled that it doesn't work for them. Maybe the screen is too complex and things like that. So you have to discuss those findings during user sessions. You have to discuss them then with the team, with project manager, other UX designers, or just if you're working by yourself, you need to take them into account and make decisions around changes of interface. Now, I strongly recommend run several sessions with users. So basically you do the session, take the findings, iterate, and do another session. We want to get with the sessions to the place where users don't get stuck in any places. And also when people ideally get excited about the product and starts asking questions such as when the real product is going to be available, then you're in a fantastic place, and this is a good time to start working on very detailed UI. So that every UX designer will be working on that. I personally really like doing branding and also applying really pretty UI, so micro interactions, animations, and things like that. But remember, guys, that comes at the very end. We don't want to do it at the very beginning because it will be a massive distraction. And it actually could massively influence in the bad way the entire product. Okay, so I like applying branding and UI. I'm not going to talk about how you can find inspiration. I'm sure everybody's aware of how to find similar apps on Dribbble or Pinterest, where you can just literally get lots of inspiration of how to design really cool apps. So I apply branding, I apply some kind of cool imagery or iconography. I very often also would create a small design system, but this is just my approach. Not everybody likes working with design system. And I would then hand over the designs in Figma to developers. Now, here's a small caveat. I have to say that I actually include developers much early on in the process. That's because once I have some kind of flows that I already showing to the user, I want to involve developers because I want to make sure we're not designing anything that it's technically impossible or very expensive. So I'm saying I'm handing over at the end, but I have to highlight that it's really good to include developers much earlier on in the process. Okay, guys, so very straightforward, I guess. And please let me know in the comments below if you have questions about any of these steps. But in general, the process of user-centered design is very straightforward. Just remember the main principle, which is including user at every step of the design decision making. And again, let's just really quickly just cover it again and summarize. So basically, we want to have defined problem and who we're designing for. We want to validate that with users that this problem exists, and also find out how our product will be fitting in their life to solve that problem. We want to try to create personas, obviously, like I said, optional if you're not very confident doing that. Then we want to create some kind of wireframes, either on a piece of paper or in some kind of prototyping tool or even Figma. And we want to run some user sessions, okay, to understand if our product is actually working for them. From the user sessions, you will have lots of feedback. So we want to iterate several times usability testing until we are confident that what we have is really good. Okay, technically this is not part of the process of the user-centered process, but I like adding to that UI and branding and some design system if possible, and obviously handing over to the developers at the very end. Now, very important thing that everybody forgets about and everybody hates when I say that, the user-centered design is not one-off event, okay? We cannot just do it once and forget about it, unfortunately. The user-centered design is something that's happening and should become an ongoing thing in your company, or if you're completely new to it, it should become part of your ongoing practice. So after we've built the product, after people starting using it, I strongly recommend repeat several of the steps. Obviously not designing new product from scratch, but once the product is live, again, run some sessions with users, understand how they like using the product, understand how it fits in life, understand what else we could add to that product to make it better. So user-centered design is really ongoing relationship with your users and taking into account constantly their needs and desires. And that way, the best companies in the world are able to deliver fantastic products that people absolutely love using. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please comment below. I love answering questions. If you really enjoy content that I make, please subscribe to this channel, share this video, and please enjoy the design process because it's a fantastic thing to be doing. Thanks so much and see you again soon.